Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 92. How are you? I hope that you are well. Happy half term to all of the teachers and the school staff out there who are at the beginning of a much needed week off work. Commiserations if you're back in work and you've already had your week off. Ours is just beginning and I'm thrilled about it. I am very, very excited to record this episode because I feel like this might be my most impactful episode yet. I know it's a big claim, but I feel like it is. If you apply what I am teaching you today, you are going to see massive positive shifts, and I would love to hear your feedback on this episode. I'm really interested to hear what you think about it. So it'll probably be quite a deep one, this. So if you're listening in the background, feel free. Carry on with your ironing or whatever it is that you're doing. But it might be one that you want to go back to and listen to again and like make a few notes on, or just really take in what I'm sharing with you today, because I think it's really going to help you. So this week, I'm going to be talking about something called method acting and using that to manifest. And if you haven't already heard of method acting, it's an approach that was developed by this Russian guy called Stanislavski. No, it's not. It's Stanislavski. And then it was later popularised by another American guy called Strasberg. And it was and is still used as a way to help actors really completely embody the character that they're playing in order to create a very authentic performance. So some famous actors who've used this method are Joaquin Phoenix, who played the Joker. And some of the things that he did was he lost 52 pounds and he was very controversial, like in general, and also in the way that he behaved in interviews leading up to the film. He was completely different to his normal self and he was very much like the Joker. And he kept a diary every day in role as the person that he played, Arthur Fleck, or also known as the Joker, and wrote down all of the thoughts that he had as he like mentally unravelled. And he just fully embodied the kind of unhinged nature of the baddie that he was playing in the film Batman. So another one is Jamie Foxx in his role in a film called Ray. He worked with a vocal coach to develop the same voice as Ray Charles, because obviously he was a singer. He also lost 30 pounds. He learnt to play the piano fluently. Is that the right word? Fluently? Well. And he also wore prosthetics under his eyelids to simulate what life would be like as a blind person, and lived like that in advance of filming so that you could really experience what it was like to become Ray Charles, the character that he was playing. So someone else who did it was Meryl Streep. She was in a film called Sophie's Choice, and she learned how to speak Polish and did it with a convincing accent far beyond the lines that were in a script. So she spent months and months learning how to speak Polish pretty fluently, and also researching the impact of the Holocaust on the survivors before she played her role as a woman called Sophie Zawatowski. I think I've got that right, in the film Sophie's Choice. So another one is Christian Bale. He deprived himself of sleep and he just had 2 hours a night for the weeks leading up to him playing his role of this insomniac character called Trevor Resnick in a film called The Machinist, so that he would experience what that would be like for him, what that state of mind of being completely deprived of sleep would feel like in order to act authentically. So Robert De Niro also did this in his role as Travis Bickle in a film called Taxi Driver, which is a pretty old film now, but he isolated himself because this character was quite lonely in the film, so he isolated himself completely. And he also worked as a taxi driver for months before filming it. So he actually went out around the city and was a taxi driver. Imagine that, just getting in a car and like Robert De Niro's your taxi driver. And possibly the most famous one is Jim Carrey in the role of Andy Kaufman. I think it's Kaufman, one of those. He did a film called Man on the Moon, and there's actually a behind the scenes documentary called Jim and Andy The Great Beyond, and it's on Netflix, and I would highly recommend it. But basically, it shows how during the filming of Man on the Moon, Jim Carrey lived 100% in role at all times, even when he was at home, as Andy Kaufman. And due to his kind of like little bit crackers, chaotic nature, it was really difficult to film because Jim had become Andy, and he would do all of the things that Andy would have done, like walking off the set and things like that. And it's so interesting to watch because he became so entangled with Andy's character that Andy Kaufman's daughter, who had a bit of a fractured relationship with her dad when he was alive, sat down with Jim, like as Andy in character, and had a bit of a like heart to heart to heal from the relationship. It's fucking wild, honestly. It's so crazy. But afterwards, Jim Carrey actually like struggled to remember who Jim Carrey was because he was such a good method actor that he had spent months never once stepping out of the role of Andy Kaufman, and he felt more like Andy Kaufman than he did Jim Carrey. It was like that kind of person wasn't in existence anymore, and he had to try and find it again. So all of those actors that I've talked about won awards like BAFTAs and Academy Awards and Oscars for the parts that they played. And if you've watched any of those films, you'll see why. It's because they're so convincing in the character that they play, and as a result, the films are absolutely incredible. And the last one that I mentioned, Jim Carrey, I think is particularly interesting because Jim Carrey is well known as being a very, very effective manifester. And I'm going to share with you a quick story about his manifestations. So when Jim was a little boy, he had like a supply teacher, I suppose, one day at school. And this woman was from Ireland, and she told him and the rest of the class that whenever she wanted something, she prayed to the Virgin Mary for it, and she got what she wanted. She was obviously like quite maybe a strong Catholic and wanted to get them on board. But he took that as like, that's interesting. So that night he went and stood in a field with his arms wide open, and he prayed for a bicycle. He was like, I need a bicycle. I'm going to get one. So he did exactly what she'd said. And 2 weeks later, he went home and there was a brand new bike in the living room, right? And it turned out that one of his school friends, had been into this sports shop and seen that there was a raffle to win a new bike. So this friend had put his name in, and he'd also put Jim's name into this raffle. And Jim ended up winning this raffle that he didn't even know that he'd been entered into. So that was the point at which he realised that he was able to manifest anything he desired fairly easily. So when he grew up, he didn't forget about that power. And when he was a struggling actor trying to make it in Hollywood, he would go up to Mulholland Drive in his old car and park up, and he would sit there and visualise having directors being interested in him and people that he respected saying that they loved his work. And at that time, he was absolutely brassic, like didn't have any money, was struggling. So he wrote himself a cheque, like physically wrote himself a cheque for $10 million for acting services rendered. And he dated it 3 years ahead on Thanksgiving. And then he put that cheque in his wallet. And from then on, he continued to accept that that was the truth, that he had been paid $10 million for his acting services. And he didn't get distracted by his circumstances. He just accepted that that was coming. And there was no doubt about it. And then just before Thanksgiving, 3 years later, so just before the date on the cheque expired, he got a call to say that he was going to be paid $10 million for his first blockbuster film, which was Dumb and Dumber. And I fucking love that story. Not only is Jim Carrey an incredible actor, he's one of my favourites, but he's also a fantastic manifestation teacher, and he speaks about that a lot. But you can tell in any film that he's in, whether you like him or not, he can completely become that person. He isn't one of those actors who kind of is put in one particular role, you know. I don't want to like badmouth actors, but there's certain actors I think that just get kind of put in the same role over and over again because that's kind of who they play. But he can become anything and he can do it so convincingly. He can be serious, he can be funny, he can be anything. And that's because he knows how to embody the role of the character that he's playing. He uses that method acting. So what's happened with many of these actors is they've sort of unzipped the suit of who they are and they've stepped completely out of it and into the suit of the character that they're playing. So by the end, there's nothing to little left of the person that they were before, and that's called an identity shift. Now, obviously, what a lot of those actors did was actually quite unhealthy and damaging. For example, the rapid weight loss and the sleep deprivation. But what they all did incredibly well is embody the role that they wanted to become in the film. So they lived in role even when the cameras weren't rolling. And it just so happens that the people that they were becoming were quite troubled or twisted in lots of the roles, like the Joker. So a lot of these actors really struggle to reconnect with the person that they were before because there was just no separation. And that's why I want to talk to you today about using method acting, because when you use it well, method acting can be incredibly powerful. It's a fantastic tool for manifesting a life that you desire. Because when you're shifting identity from one to another, you have to allow the old one to die off. And I know that seems quite dark, but let me explain a bit more what I mean there. So let's say, for example, and I'm choosing a bit of a generic one that people will relate to, like about weight loss. I think most people, particularly if you're women, have had some time in your life where you want to lose weight. It's just like a standard thing, isn't it? So let's take an imaginary person who wants to be a dramatically different weight. Let's say it's somebody that is 100 pounds overweight and they desire to be 100 pounds lighter so that they can be at a healthy weight. So the current version, who is 100 pounds overweight, is living a very different way to the version of themselves who is 100 pounds lighter. It's just a fact. So I'm being very general here, but let's say this person, this imaginary person, doesn't exercise at all. They dread exercising. They move very minimally, like they're always kind of sitting down and avoiding movement. They eat a lot of junk food and like high sugar foods, and most of the time, like they're eating that as the majority of the diet. They're eating to the point of discomfort, perhaps, like where they feel sick and uncomfortable. They might be sleeping a lot because either they've overeaten or they lack energy because they're not getting the nutrients that they need. They eat to deal with emotions that are uncomfortable, and they might avoid socialising because they might feel self-conscious about the way that they look, and so they dress in a certain way that they don't really like, but it helps them to hide their appearance. They might not wear makeup or do the hair because they feel like, kind of, what's the point? If they don't like the way they look, why would they go to that effort? So they might not make any effort with their appearance at all. They might also do things like people pleasing to feel accepted and validated because they're not getting attention from, being strikingly well put together, for example. I'm just being generally like, don't for one second think that I think that's the case for everyone. I'm just using that as an example. So now let's think about that same person who is now at their desired weight, 100 pounds lighter. That version of them might wake up really early to prioritise exercise, not because they have to, because they want to, because they know that exercising is going to help the body to stay healthy and for them to enjoy their lives to the full. That person's not exercising to lose weight because they have to, and that part's really important, and so is this part. They're eating foods that nourish the body because they want to look after themselves, because they want to make sure that the body is able to function well and stay healthy, not to punish themselves because they've eaten badly, or, well, what they perceive as badly, or out of a feeling of like desperation, because they don't need to feel like that. They're already at their desired weight. That doesn't exist anymore in their reality. They wear clothes based on things that they love, like they pick colours that they want and styles that they really love, not to hide themselves. they might put makeup on so that they feel good. Not that you need makeup to feel good, but maybe this person in this example enjoys wearing makeup, so they put makeup on. They make an effort, they do the hair, they speak kindly to themselves, they speak about how proud they are of themselves and how healthy they look and how strong they are and how well they feel. They don't berate themselves. They would say yes to social occasions because they feel confident and they can enjoy themselves while they're out and not feel self-conscious. They live as if the desire is done because it is. So that's precisely what embodiment is. It's living fully in role 100% of the time as the person who already has the desire until there is no separation, and you are that person. And once you become that version that has your desire, by universal laws, it has no choice then but to manifest in your 3D reality, because you are an energetic match to your desire. You are living in that vision, which is what I'm always talking about, living in the vision. So there's a quote by a man called Alan Watts, and he says, "You are under no obligation to be the same person that you were 5 minutes ago." And I fucking love that quote. I love it. You can absolutely, without doubt, shift into a new identity of your choice at any given moment. And the way that you do that is by embodying the version of you that already has it, or method acting, you could call it. So you might be thinking, well, Sophie, you're always telling us to be ourselves. Absolutely, I am. 100% be yourself. Unlike the actors who are becoming a character that somebody else has written that already exists, you are method acting your way into a version of you that is living your dream life, who has all of the amazing qualities that you already love about yourself, but who is no longer holding on to those parts of yourself that you don't feel are serving you. You're just stepping into the role of your best self. You're embodying your highest self. So I'm not at all suggesting that you disregard every bit of yourself, because there will be parts of yourself that you really love. But I'm saying that if there's something that you don't like, you don't have to keep living in that role anymore. You can shift that to a new identity, to an evolved identity that you prefer. What you've really got to understand about reality and identity is that it's not fixed. It's completely malleable. Just as if you were making a person out of Play-Doh and you didn't quite like the outcome, you could just squash it in the palm of your hands with no effort, and you could remold it into one that you prefer. Or if it was perfect but you didn't like its head, you could take its head off, squish it, and put a new head on it. And so can you with your identity. It works the same way. So I want you to think about this for a second. If I asked you, who are you? What would you say? Like, just think about that for a second. If I said, who are you? What would you tell me? Would you tell me your name? Would you tell me your age? Would you tell me what you do for a living, or how many kids you have, or where you live? Because you are playing the role of a character. We all are. I am. You are. We all are. Because what we actually are is a spark of like God energy, which is currently incarnated as a human being, playing the role of a character called insert your name here. So I am playing the role of Sophie Waddington. Sophie Waddington used to be a primary school teacher, and she has all these things. She lives in Bolton. She does this, she does that. She's this many years old. She looks like this. There's all of these things that make up our identity, but it's just a character that we are temporarily playing. But what we really are is all one big light. We're like little sections of the same big light. So when you understand that, if you don't like the character that you're playing, you can switch it to a new one whenever you like. You've got the power to do that. And I know that sounds quite like, intense, but you can switch to a new character, and you don't have to fully switch to a brand new character. You can switch out character traits that you don't like, as if you were writing the script. You're the person creating the character. You rub it out, you think, no, I don't like that. I'm going to make that character have this quality instead. Do you know what I mean? So there are certain aspects of our identity that are deeply ingrained in us, and we think that it's really hard and we'd need to work through all of this stuff, and you've got to go back and think about all of this stuff and work through it and change. But actually what you can do if you want to is just choose to switch to a new character suit. You can just switch. And I have recently discovered that I'm a big believer that you have to unpick limiting beliefs that you hold in order to replace them. That I am a big believer about. But I feel like for many years I've made things more difficult than they needed to be for myself. And I've realised recently through a personal experience that I have the capacity, and so does everybody else, to just embody a new version. As simple as that. So I'm going to give you another example, right? So let's say that you smoke 20 cigs a day and that you have done for 20 years. So you identify, understandably, as a smoker, and you'll repeatedly affirm to people, I'm a smoker. You'll tell yourself things like, I'm addicted to nicotine, I can't quit, I've tried and it's too hard, my cravings are too strong. So people who hold the identity of a smoker are going to try to quit smoking, or I would imagine most of them will. So they're going to try and quit smoking, and then they might do things like this. They might post on Facebook saying, I'm quitting smoking, smoke free for 7 days, not had a cig for a whole month. But what they haven't done is made an identity shift. They're fighting against their own subconscious mind, which is driving their behaviour, because they hold the identity of, I am a smoker who is trying to quit, instead of, I'm a non-smoker. Can you see the difference between the two? Somebody who is saying, I'm a smoker who is trying to quit, instead of, I'm a non-smoker. Very different. The first group are relying on the willpower of the smoker version of themselves to just hold on as long as possible using the willpower. But even by keeping count, you're subconsciously kind of seeing how long you can last before you ultimately know that you're going to go back to the same pattern over and over again. And each time that person fails, their identity as a smoker is reinforced, because then they feel really strongly that it's too hard and they can't do it. So them trying to quit was not successful, which means that they must still be a smoker. But if that same person stepped into the role of a version of themselves who has never smoked, who is not addicted and who never has been, they would not be addicted, and they would not use their willpower. They wouldn't need to use their willpower to just resist. They wouldn't be counting the days of how many days it's been since they last had a cig. It's just not a part of that version's identity. So the struggle is gone. Poof. In a puff of smoke, excuse the pun. So I just want you to think about that for a minute, and that might be quite difficult to accept. If that is a concept that you are feeling like you struggle to accept as truth, let's for a second just look at how the mind can work. So there's a condition called dissociative identity disorder. It used to be called multiple personalities disorder. And it's a condition where people experience life through a range of different and completely separate personalities who are all living in the same body. And I imagine that that's a very difficult thing to live with. But the reason that I'm mentioning it is to prove to you that the mind absolutely has the capacity to accept a new identity. Unfortunately, for those people who have that condition, they're obviously not able to control that, and it must be exhausting and very difficult to live with constantly switching identities. But each of those personalities or identities can have different speech, different accents, different genders, different ages, different opinions, different temperaments, different handwriting. They are completely separate identities. So I want you to understand through me talking about that Although that particular condition is not positive in any way and nobody would want that, I want you to understand that it absolutely is possible for your mind to accept a new version as truth. And for those of us who are fortunate enough not to have that condition, we can use that to our advantage. We can use our mind's capacity to accept new identity to our advantage. Okay? So I'm going to talk to you now about the 7 key principles of method acting. And I want you to kind of think about how you could personally apply these to evolve into your highest self, the one who is living in your desire, in your vision. So there's 7 of them all together, and I'm going to give you a suggestion of how it could be applied. So the first one is called emotional memory, or sometimes called sense memory. And this one is where actors recall and utilise their own personal experiences that they have to create an emotional response in their performance. So, for example, if there's a scene where maybe somebody's died, they will recall what it's like to have somebody close to them die in order to bring up those emotions. Or it could be a happy situation. I don't know why I went for the death one, but there you go. So you think about what emotions would the version of you in your vision be experiencing every day, and then you use a past experience where you've had that emotion to recall and bring up that same feeling. So, for example, if you think your person in your vision would be experiencing peace, then think about a time where you have experienced peace. Maybe it was at a meditation class, maybe it was at yoga, maybe it was on holiday. Where have you experienced peace? Go back to that and bring up that feeling. So you're kind of embodying the feeling now. Number 2 is called substitution, and that involves replacing personal memories with those of the character, and it allows them to feel the character's memories as if they were real. Now, in the law of assumption terms, this would be pretty close to something that's called revision, which is going over a memory that's impacted your identity negatively and rewriting it to a new version. And then you replay that constructed memory, that revised memory, over and over until it has replaced the original. So if there's something that you feel like is you've hanging your identity on, you go back and you revise that memory and you create a better memory that replaces it so that that doesn't continue to impact on your identity. Number 3 is physical actions. And this is the part where the actor would focus on physically expressing themselves as the character that they're playing, including their emotions and their motives. So for this one, think about how your desired version would stand. How do they move? How do they take up space? What's the body language like? What are the facial expressions like? And start presenting yourself as this new version. Number 4 is called given circumstances, and this is where the actors explore and get to understand the background of the character and create an environment that they would exist in. So obviously a lot of these characters might be living very lavish, the actors might be living very lavish lifestyles, but they might be playing a character who is very poor or who is, struggling with some kind of environment that they don't have. So they would create that environment and put themselves in it. Now we're going to do it the opposite way and kind of create the more lavish one and take yourself out of anything that's undesired. So think about, where would you live? How would you be spending your time? Who would you be with? And create that as closely as possible right now. And you might not be able to create a fancy mansion of the person who lives in your vision, but you can create spaces that are in your current home or your current work or your current environment that are more aligned with that version quite easily. So let's say if you've got a vision of having a really fancy car, could you make your car a nicer, cleaner, fresher smelling and looking place to be so that it gives more of that energy? So get yourself really closely to the environment that you desire to be in. Number 5, this one's called magic if, and this is perhaps the most important one of all. The magic if is living life constantly asking, what would my character do in this situation? This is so important. So if you're doing something, stop what you're doing and listen to this one. The magic if. Constantly asking, what would my character do in this situation? So in every moment, be asking yourself, if I already had my desire, if I was the person who is living in my vision, what choice would I be making right now? And then follow through with that choice. So if I was £100 lighter, what would I choose to eat for lunch today? It's not going to be a 6-pack of donuts, is it? Let's be honest. So if I was working in my dream job, what outfit would I choose for work today? It's not going to be a scruffy t-shirt and some shitty old pants. It's going to be something that makes you feel empowered and important and whatever it is that you feel in your job role. If I had X amount of money in the bank now, how would I invest in myself today? Constantly be asking, what decision does the person in your vision make? And make it from there. It's super, super important, that one. And that's probably the one that takes the most trust, I think. And it needs you to really have faith in that vision and really live from there. So number 6 is inner monologue. And this is where they think as the character and they speak to themselves as the character and create that internal voice which is from the character that they're playing, a bit like Joaquin Phoenix did when he was keeping the diary of the Joker every day. So if again you were £100 lighter, would you be calling yourself a fat cow in the mirror or internally, or would you be praising yourself on how strong and healthy you were? If you had X amount of money, would you be thinking, how the fuck am I going to pay my mortgage? Or would you be thinking, where shall I go on holiday this year? And who do I want to work with this month to move me forward? If you were a non-smoker, would you be thinking, shall I get a packet of cigs today? Or shall I resist? No, you wouldn't. It wouldn't even be crossing your mind. You wouldn't be having that internal monologue. So make sure that your internal monologue is, again, coming from that version of you who is living in your vision. And if it's not, correct it. Every time you hear those thoughts, correct them. Go back to the vision. And number 7 is the character analysis. And that's an in-depth analysis of a character's traits, backgrounds, life, relationships, everything really, a little bit like the Wheel of Life but for a character. And I love this one, and I think it'd be such a cool little task for us to do this week. In fact, I'm going to post a prompt to help you do this inside the private Facebook group. So if you're not already in that, come and request to join and I'll let you in, and I shall create that for us and post it in the group for you to do. And it's about designing the version of you as if they were a character in a film. And it's such a fun thing to do. It's very similar to creating your vision and getting crystal clear on your vision, but you get to go even more in depth with almost building it as if it's not you and then stepping into that role. So that's what I have for you today. I managed to pack it all in to half an hour, just about, or a little bit over. So I hope that you've enjoyed this episode and found it useful. Like I said earlier, I am eager to hear your thoughts on this one. So please, if you can, leave me a review. I'd be super grateful. I read every single one of them, I promise you. And also, I'll be putting all of the Apple reviews into a draw that I'll be drawing at the end of March to do a one-to-one. So feel free to go and leave me one on there. But also let me know how you found it in the Facebook group. Come and join us, tag me in your stories. I would love to hear. So have a fantastic week, and I will speak to all of you in your new evolved vision character next week. I'll see you later.